Hello everyone, welcome to Research Series episode. Today's topic is Film Studies in English Literature. Film Studies in English Literature explores the relationship between literary works and their cinematic adaptations, as well as the impact of film on narrative, style, and the thematic elements within literature. This interdisciplinary field examines how literature influences film, how films reinterpret literary text, and the ways in which both mediums use visual and textual storytelling techniques to convey meaning. Now, let's see the key themes in film studies. Adaptation theory. Adaptation studies focuses on how novels, plays, and other literary forms are translated into film, exploring what is changed, retained, or reinterpreted. For example, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen has been adapted many times into film, each version highlighting different aspects of character, society, and class, depending on the director's vision. Next, intertextuality and influence. Literature and film often borrow from each other, creating intertextual connections where one work references or is influenced by another across media. For example, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad heavily influenced the film Apocalypse Now, where the narrative and the themes of imperialism and human nature are recontextualized in the Vietnam War. Next, literary techniques in film. Some films incorporate literary techniques such as unreliable narration, stream of consciousness, or symbolism traditionally associated with literature. For example, Fight Club, adapted from Chuck Palahniuk's novel, uses voiceover narration and fragmented storytelling to create a psychological depth similar to literary techniques. Next, authorship and directorial vision. This area studies the author role of directors in adaptation, exploring how directors impose their unique style and interpretation onto literary text. For example, Alfred Hitchcock's adaptations of literary works like Rebecca and The Strangers on a Train bear his signature suspenseful style, which influences the audience's perception of the original stories. Next, genre and cross-media experimentation. Examine how genres like noir, gothic, or fantasy translate between literature and film, sometimes reinventing or modernizing classic genres. For example, the Lord of Rings trilogy adapted by Peter Jackson not only brings Tolkien's epic fantasy to screen, but also introduces new visual conventions for fantasy films. Next, representation of time and space. Literature and film each have unique ways of representing time and space, with adaptations exploring how to visually depict what may really be implied in text. For example, The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby is an example for every kind of studies, research related to the literature, film, novel, whatever. So, Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald in Baz Luhrmann's adaptation uses CGI and quick cut sequences to capture the rapid pace of Gatsby's world, paralleling Fitzgerald's descriptive prose. Next, cultural and social commentary. Many literary adaptations highlight or critique social issues, with films using visual techniques to enhance themes related to culture, race, gender, and politics. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, in both book and film form, critiques racism and justice in America, with each medium reaching different audiences and adding unique emphasis. Next, narrative perspective and point of view. Explore how literature's narrative point of view are adapted for film, which often uses visual and auditory cues to express character perspectives. For example, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, originally narrated by Chief Bromden in the novel, is represented from McMurphy's point of view in the film, changing the story's perspective and audience interpretation. And the last theme is film and postmodern literature. Postmodern literature often deconstructs narrative form, an approach that aligns with experimental films that question the boundaries of storytelling. For example, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, a postmodern novel, inspired a film that similarly reflects the novel's fragmented, non-linear structure to convey themes of trauma and time. Now let's see the notable literary works and their film adaptations. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, Apocalypse Now, Lord of the Flies by William Golding, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. The critical approaches in film studies within English literature are adaptation theory, author theory, feminist film theory, psychoanalytic theory, cultural studies approach, and intertextuality. And the notable scholars and theorists in film studies and English literature are Linda Hetchion, Laura Mulvey, Thomas Leach, Robert Stamm, and Andre Bazin. Key terms in film studies: adaptation, author theory, intertextuality, cinematic techniques, genre studies, narrative structure, fidelity criticism, semiotics, spectatorship, representation, post-colonial cinema, transmedia storytelling, cultural criticism, film theory, iconography, mise-en-scene, cinematic realism, narrative voice, characterization, sound and music, subtext, point of view, diegesis, global cinema, and psychological realism. Now we are moving on to the important section of today's episode, that is possible research topics related to film studies in English literature. First one, adaptation of psychological realism in film versions of 20th century novels. Here you have to investigate how internal thought and complex psychological themes in modern literature are represented in film. Second topic, comparative analysis of Gothic elements in literature and film. Examine how Gothic conventions in novels are adapted in horror films, focusing on atmosphere, suspense, and symbolism. Next topic, feminist film criticism and the representation of women in Jane Austen's adaptations. Analyze how different film adaptations of Austen's novels interpret and depict gender roles, marriage, and independence. Next, the influence of author theory in Shakespearean film adaptations. Explore how directors' unique styles shape adaptations of Shakespearean plays. Next topic, race and representation in post-colonial film adaptations of classic English literature. Study how post-colonial adaptations interpret colonial themes and racial representation in classic literature. Next, intertextuality and homage in film adaptations of Dickens novels. Analyze how contemporary adaptations reference not only Dickens' text but also previous adaptations, creating a layered narrative. Next, the role of soundscapes in adapting nature descriptions from literature to film. Explore how nature, as described in pastoral literature, is conveyed in films through sound and visual effects. Next, fidelity versus creativity in modern adaptations of Greek myths in cinema. Examine the balance between fidelity to source texts and creative liberties in films based on Greek mythology. Next topic, audience reception of gender and sexuality in contemporary film adaptations of classic literature. Study audience responses to the portrayal of gender and sexuality in modern film adaptations of literary classics. Next topic, symbolism and mise-en-scene in adaptations of the work of F. Scott Fitzgerald. Analyze the symbolic role of visual elements in film adaptations of Fitzgerald's novels, particularly The Great Gatsby. The role of transmedia storytelling in adapting Harry Potter for film and beyond. Investigate how the Harry Potter narrative expands across books, films, games, and online media, creating a complex web of storylines. Narrative structure and time in film adaptations of modernist literature. Examine how nonlinear narrative techniques in modernist novels are adapted or altered in film versions. Next topic, cultural identity in Indian cinema's adaptations of English literature. Analyze how Indian cinema interprets and recontextualizes British literary works, emphasizing cultural nuances. Next topic, class and social hierarchy in British literature and its film adaptations. Study how the themes of class, hierarchy, and social mobility in British novels are portrayed on screen. The impact of cinematic realism on adaptations of realist novels. Explore how the techniques of cinematic realism enhance or detract from realist novels' themes when adapted into films. Next, the evolution of narrative voice from Victorian novels to their film adaptations. Examine how the narrative voice, omniscient in many Victorian novels, is adapted for film audiences. Next, trauma and memory in film adaptations of Holocaust literature. Analyze how trauma and memory in Holocaust literature are visualized and represented in film adaptations. Next, iconography of the American dream in film adaptations of American literature. Study how symbols of the American dream in literature like cars and mansions are adapted visually in films. Next, the role of mise-en-scene in creating atmosphere in adaptations of Edgar Allan Poe's works. Investigate how elements such as lighting, color, and set design contribute to the eerie atmosphere in film versions of Poe's stories. And the last topic, digital animation and adaptation from children's literature to the big screen. Examine how digital animation techniques in adaptations of children's literature create a unique cinematic experiences. Okay, these are some of the topics. You can also come up with your own. Keep on researching. Bye.